I arrived at Cornell University in 1984, and I went there to study African politics because I was ill-informed about what the faculty had to offer. I found out that the one person who studied Africa as a prerequisite for studying wanted you to go join the Peace Corps for 3 years, read a lot about fertilizer, then come back and maybe formulate a dissertation proposal. And it was on the heels of that conversation that I wandered into Ben Anderson's class for the first time. And it was an astounding experience. I went to Cornell from Syracuse, New York, where I grew up, 70 miles away. A short bus trip down. I went because it was close and I was parochial. And I walked into a classroom that was filled with people from all over the world. The great Indonesian journalist Daniel Dakide in exile was there. Tessa we met for the first time in that classroom. Art Corpus was there. Efren Zaz was there. Tawipan Basapul, daughter of a Thai general, soon to be followed by Seksan and Kasian, great sort of Thai activists who were in exile. And Ben sat in the middle of this group and sort of guided people through conversations that were like no conversation I'd ever sat through. And sitting in that room, I thought, if I can just stay here with these people and listen to the conversations they had. The first time he ever talked about Jose Rizal in that class, Vince, was when you came and taught that class. And he was in the process, this is about 2 years after Imagine Communities came out, and so he was in the process of pushing the boundaries and trying to figure out the relationship between the sacred and the profane, and how you can kind of figure out where the nation's boundaries begin and end. And so the question he was asking was, if Jose Rizal is a kind of founding figure in Philippine history, how far can you push that? Where would you find him? And so, well, could you use him to sell beer? Could you? Yeah, maybe you could have Rizal beer. Could you? And so asking people in the room, how far could you push it? How far could you push it? And typically he wound up by saying, well, could you put his face on a condom package? and no, you couldn't. So we figured out where the edge of that was, and this is what he did all class long, all semester long. He took something like that, some question like that, and asked the people from the region what they thought of it. How they, is this how you think of your nation? Is this how you think of power? He asked Tessa at one point, he said, these names, Bong Bong. What do you think when with a politician named Bong Bong? And remember your answer? He said, we think it's cute. And then he asked somebody else what they thought of his name. The hardest conversation I think I've ever had, the most bewildering conversation, was going to ask Ben Anderson to be my dissertation supervisor. And it was, I spent 45 minutes with a man, and I didn't know what was happening. I'd formulate my question, it was almost out, and he would interrupt. I'd formulate my question, and it was almost out. He would change the topic. After 45 minutes, I just gave up. Maybe next week I'll set another meeting. And I wandered back across the quad at Cornell. His office was about a 10-minute walk away from the government department. And when I got there, the departmental administrator said, I just got off the phone with Ben. He wants you to go back. And I said, why? He said, well, he called, and he wanted to know if you were nice. And I said that you were. So he said, come back. So I went back, and he said, now ask me what you wanted to ask. Well, I thought about that a lot. I thought about it as I've taught his work. I thought about it as I have thought about his passing and what his legacy has been. And for years I thought the question was really, is he going to want to link himself to someone who's going to be a pain in the rear end, or someone who's nice and easy to work with? And for years that was a satisfying answer. But I don't truth. I think, and this maybe, Joel, goes to part of your question, what links the people that he works with. Because if you think about how he interrogates history, what he asks of a people, from imagined communities to his reading of what it meant to Indonesians in a field watching a train come by at the same time every day. What he's trying to figure out is how do people as a collective think about their society and their history and their politics. It's the same question he was asking us in his classroom all those years ago, consistently. And I think in his mind, you don't get that kind of historical or sociological empathy without paying attention to people. The way he paid attention to everyone that was around him. It wasn't just a disposition, it wasn't just an ethic, it was a methodology for him. Pay attention, talk to people, reconstruct what they're thinking. Vincent, you talked about the world that Rizal occupied. And it's a very striking part of that bit of writing, but it's also, you put Rizal in historical context, but you also ask, what was Rizal thinking? Like, what did he read when he read his contemporaries, when he looked around for models? If you ever went to a dinner party with Ben, nobody left the party without being talked to. He would find a way to find 10 minutes to sit down and figure out what was going on with you. And so I think one of the things that links his students together is this idea that it's important to pay attention to the people around you, to construct what they as individuals think about their surroundings, and what they as a people, as a society, as a moment in history think is going on. This mistake that you keep hearing, and it's kind of strange to me that people keep misinterpreting this word imagine as inauthentic as opposed to created cognitively, conceptually. You see, I still read people who talk about Anderson's conception of a nation as inauthentic rather than as a creative act. You don't get that without taking seriously the thoughts and the sympathies of the people that are the object of study. And so I think in a time when people often are not sympathetic to each other, or often aren't nice to each other, often aren't paying attention to one another, you have this towering historical, intellectual legacy of Benedict Anderson. But you don't get it, you can't get it, without mirroring those impressive intellectual capacities. I mean, words almost fail when you think about how gifted this man was, with a real fundamental kindness and an absolute commitment to paying attention to people. So, I'll miss him.